Hello everyone, and welcome to SUNUP. I'm Lyndall Stout. One of the wettest springs on record means plenty of adjustments in the field for winter crops, and now a sense of urgency for getting summer crops going. SUNUP's Curtis Hare takes us to a family farm in Beckham County to see how all the rain is impacting their cotton production.
Normally in mid-June, the field plots on the Smith family farm would have cotton stands almost knee-high. But this year has been anything but normal.
This has been a real interesting year. And actually, it started for us back in October at harvest. We had a horrible time harvesting the crop this year because it was so wet, and it just kept raining. And it was hard to get in there and kill our weeds, and everything. And now, gosh, every time it gets just about dry enough to think about doing something, rains again. It's hard to complain about the rain, but dadgum, we need to spread it out more.
In the past 180 days, about 23 inches of rainfall has filled up the Beckham County soils, leaving producers like Jimmy Smith struggling to get seed in the fields.
Here, we like to plant anytime after the 15th of May. Like last year, we planted I think the 18th of May, and we were done, way before the 1st of June.
Rain is not the only problem either.
Things were going good, but this year, gosh, even if we could have got in there, the soil temperature was so cold that I don't know if that'd have been a good thing to do. Because even right now, I don't know, it's probably between 66, maybe 68 degrees, I don't know, but that's about borderline where it needs to be. And this morning we woke up, it was 54 degrees, and here it is June the 10th. That's not a good thing.
It's not just small area here. Everybody's been affected by the amount of rainfall, cooler temperatures. And the forecast looks like that we're going to be cooler through the month of June with rainfall coming here in the next couple of days. So we're kind of up against the wall. We've got to get things done when we can in a timely manner.
This is the first day we've been back in the field for about a week. No, it ain't great, but with the predictions of more rain coming, and we know we can get some of it up, so we're running.
They're trying to everything they can do to get the crop in because, here in Beckham County, we're looking at the 20th of June for insurance purposes, and that's only 10 days away. So they've got to really run and gun as much as they can to get this crop in because we're just running out of time.
Jimmy and his son Spencer are scrambling to plant what they can, though the soil temperature and moisture are preventing the rows from covering up what little seed they do get in.
We could take the prevented planting thing, which a lot of people are talking about. The problem with that is, well, we've got our fertilizer cost out there. We've sprayed it twice with chemicals, so the only thing we would be saving is our seed. And so if we can plant it, we need to plant it. And the other thing is, how cotton acres, they keep increasing every year. Well, that might not be the case this year. So if we could make part of a crop, the price could possibly go up enough to compensate somewhat for what you lose.
Normally, Jimmy and his son plant around 1,300 acres of cotton, but this year they've only been able to get about a third of that in. Jimmy says he's never seen anything like this in his 40-plus years of growing cotton.
And I've even talked to people older than me that they've never seen anything like this. Of course, we always have some terrace channels and stuff that might drown out, but nothing like this where you're almost afraid to go across it because you might just sink.
Jimmy says he hopes Mother Nature cooperates this fall for harvest, and he's not going to let this season prevent him from planting another crop next year. He's a cotton producer through and through, though he's not sure why.
I don't know. I guess it's because we've always done it. I don't know. And, I don't even own a combine, but we just have always done it. That's what our family's done it, and I guess it's just passed on down. I don't know. And now my son does it.
Well, and with that, Seth, it has been a slow start to cotton production this year. Is this something that producers should be worried about?
Yeah, to a certain extent. So we all know that cotton's sort of a delicate crop early on. It likes to kind of be, stress-free to get off to a good start. And we've had multiple things that have compounded our slow start. So obviously the rain that's been statewide this year has kept a lot of folks out of the fields when maybe they'd normally like to get in there and plant. In other situations, we've had cotton that's gotten in the ground, but has gotten a really slow start because of the conditions. When we look at our heat units, which is what we usually focus on for cotton, progress and where we should be, surprisingly, we're not that far off from our 10-year average. We're only about 3 to 4 days off, so about 50 heat units off. But compared to last year, and we all have kind of that short-term memory where we're going to compare it to our last year, we're about 250, 260 heat units off from what we saw in 2018. And it depends on where you are in the state, too. So that's, where we were last year this time was much further ahead, but we also were much drier then. So if we do start to get, a few more sunny, warmer days, we've got the moisture down deep to drive this crop. We just need to get the conditions that are going to help, promote that vigorous growth.
Are we seeing situations between dry land and irrigated cotton potential this year?
So one thing about the rain, it's kind of evened everything out.
Right.
With irrigated cotton in certain places where you have, the ability to turn a pivot on and help it, get out of the ground, we've seen light shots of water go out to sort of break crust up from hard packing rains, but we haven't seen those rescue shots that we've needed to get, just the moisture in the seed bed. So we hope that we can get a pretty, good start across the board, whether we're dry land and irrigated from a moisture standpoint. Again, it kind of goes back to some of our other conditions. And on the downside of being dry land, if you do get those packing rains, those crusting rains, you don't really have a quick way to get rid of it. You've got to go out there with some light tillage and sort of scratch or hoe the surface and try to break that crust up to promote, those seedlings from emerging.
We know that there are deadlines on planting dates coming up, and some have passed already. Are there? When is it too late overall to get the seed in the ground? Because it has been a not so typical year, I guess.
Yeah, so June 10th for most of Oklahoma is our irrigated deadline. So that's for full coverage.
Mm-hmm.
June 20th is for, again, most of the state, not all of it,
right,
is dry land. As far as your last realistic date, it's really, if you could tell what it was going to do in August and September, we'd have a much better idea, right? That's the easy thing to say. For northern Oklahoma, a lot of that's going to be dry land outside of the Panhandle, and even in the Panhandle, I would certainly hesitate to put cotton in the ground, much after the first week of June. You're going to certainly into the short season. Now, there are varieties out there. There are things we can do to manage it for earliness. So there are things we can do to mitigate some of this, and a lot of it comes down to fertility, it comes down to variety selection, and comes down to just overall, management of pests, making sure there's no weeds and thrips and pest feeding. So there's things we can do to mitigate it, but I think realistically, there's a reason we have these final plant deadlines, these insurance deadlines, and going past those in a lot of areas is going to put us in a bind. And maybe another crop that might be a better option in those cases.
And you mentioned some of those pest pressures there. Let's talk about the potential for weed pressure and then insects. Are we going to see that with planting dates adjusted this year?
Yeah, so we've already seen some thrips pressure hit us. Now, what we typically think of with thrips, and that's a small vegetative feeding pest, and they like to feed on the new growth, the tender growth, and they really prefer smaller plants. Usually, the later you plant, the lower that potential goes, but we've seen thrips pressure already pretty high in areas, and we know folks are making oversprays once it comes out of the ground. Weeds, if you think about the moisture situation, if cotton's got good moisture, it means weeds probably have excellent moisture. So we are certainly seeing a lot of pressure on our herbicides. And so if we're in a replant situation, or if we're trying to get a struggling crop to survive, we really need to be on time with our pesticide applications, whether that's for an insect or weeds, to sort of eliminate as much competition as we can and promote again those vigorous growing conditions.
So all of that with a little bit of a break in rain and warmer temperatures.
That would all help.
Okay,
Yes.
Thank you very much, Seth. We'll check in with you later. Seth Byrd, cotton specialist here at Oklahoma State University.
Welcome to the weekly Mesonet Weather Report. I'm Wes Lee. Another out of the ordinary week of weather for Oklahoma, but this time some good news to talk about. Sunday started off the week with a bang as a strong cold front moved through the state. This kicked off fast-moving storms in central Oklahoma with some damaging winds that peaked as high as 63 miles per hour in Bernieville. The ensuing weather behind the front brought us some very enjoyable weather. This map shows cooler than normal temperatures that only peaked in the 70s on Monday and continued the same on Tuesday. On Tuesday, clear skies dominated as seen on this solar radiation map with only a few scattered clouds in the far southeast. Relative humidities were also below 50% for most of the day as well, reaching as low as 20% in Kenton. Steady winds, especially in the west on Monday and Tuesday, were just what we needed to start the drying process for the state's waterlogged soils. This had potential tall crop evapotranspiration rates reaching near ½ an inch in the Panhandle and about 1/3 of an inch in the rest of the western counties. Hopefully, wheat producers in the southwest experienced some of these favorable conditions and were allowed to resume bringing in this year's crop. Gary's up next, discussing wet weather conditions in the entire U.S.
Thanks, Wes, and good morning, everyone. Well, the story this week remains rain, rain, rain. It's been a long time, and unfortunately, we're still there this week. Now, when we look at this disaster, we can look at it in many different ways, but when you see the actual rainfall data on the Mesonet maps, it's even more shocking. The rainfall totals across the northern parts of the state are astronomical. Now we go from about 4 inches of rainfall, a little bit more, closer to 5, out in the western Panhandle, to nearly 27 inches of rain in far northeastern Oklahoma. But it's really that area from north central down into central up into northeastern Oklahoma that bears the greatest brunt of this disaster. But those rainfall amounts, in some cases, are nearly 2/3 of the annual total. We look at the USDA topsoil moisture maps, the percent surplus across the nation, and we see from the southern plains up into the Ohio River Valley, lots of good moisture, topsoil moisture. Now for Oklahoma, we're at 36% in the surplus. That's the best category, with an additional 62% designated as adequate, at least for the topsoil moistures. Now we look at a recent relative greenness map, and we see not quite as much mature wheat across the wheat belt of Oklahoma. You know, that's what happens when we have that cool weather from February through March, and then we have the abundant moisture. The wheat crop's a little bit immature still, but we do see some greatly added benefits across the far western parts of the state. So eventually, we're probably going to talk about drought again on the Mesonet weather report. Not anytime soon, probably. Now that's a good thing, but we also would like to have a little bit of a drying up period. Now, not drought, but just, no rain for a little while. Until then, we'll see you next time on the Mesonet weather report.
Producers have had questions in recent months about growing hemp in Oklahoma. SUNUP's Dave Deacon caught up with our Northwest area agronomist Josh Bushong at the recent field day at Lahoma.
There's a new crop of interest being talked about across the state, and actually here at Lahoma, Josh, you've been talking with producers about industrial hemp.
Yes, industrial hemp obviously has been a very hot topic last couple of years. So a lot of guys that wanted to grow it, we can now legally grow it. You have to apply for a license 30 days before you actually plant. To get a license, you have to partner with a university or a college that has a plant and science curriculum. So there's at least 8 of those across Oklahoma that have been helping producers get those licenses. So right now we're just kind of in the learning phase with a lot of guys. We're helping them compiling some stuff. We just made a new fact sheet with some agronomic tips from other universities, so it is research-based information, as well as we have a frequently asked questions fact sheet that we can link to as well. So if someone is curious about growing it, they can find out a lot more about it.
As far as the plant goes and the agronomy side of it, what should producers know? Is it a summer crop? Is it a winter crop? Is it a grass? Is it how is the plant?
It is an annual summer broadleaf, and it is an oil seed.
Oh, okay.
So a lot like our canola and soybeans and even cottonseed, a pretty good percentage of that is oil in that seed. But obviously the main focus is on fiber production or CBD oil, cannabidol. So there are a lot of different uses for hemp, and then a producer needs to know what type of crop he really wants to grow. So there's different varieties and agronomic management practices that we need to know beforehand If you're growing a fiber type, your plant population, your variety selection, you're going after big biomass, tall varieties, upwards of 18 foot tall. But if we are going after more the CBD oil, that's going to be trying to harvest floral buds. So we're at very low population, anywhere from 20 inches to 6 feet between plants, almost manage more of a horticultural crop.
And with any crop grown across the state, it's important to have somewhere to process the product once you harvest it.
And that's kind of the big issue we got right now with any new crop in the area, is do we have the market demand for it, or market options for guys to deliver to locally. There are a few processors that are processing hemp biomass for CBD oil. There's a fiber plant in the southwest corner of the state, and like I said, it's kind of a new industry in Oklahoma. Markets might be developed. Fiber might be an option. Growing it for seed might be an option. Growing it as an oil seed for even biofuel is another option. And even like you said, with the floral CBD, there's obviously a big demand for it. There's just not a lot of processors in Oklahoma right now.
So really, it comes down to, it's still a newer crop in Oklahoma, and there's still a lot of research going into it right now.
There's a lot of research. OSU is not conducting any research this year until we get the new Farm Bill implemented through government agencies. And that's another thing, growers need to contact their lending agencies, their ag lenders, their actual bank with their mortgage and car loan and everything else, and see if they're all willing to be okay with them growing hemp. So we don't want to jeopardize any FSA loans, RMA subsidies, or like I said, even your mortgage. So have that conversation with your lenders.
It's all about setting it up in front there. Okay, thank you very much, Josh. And for more information on industrial hemp and a link to some of those fact sheets, go to our website, sunup.okstate.edu.
The June WASDE report was released this week, and the Oklahoma wheat harvest is well underway. Here to talk about it all is Kim Anderson, our crop marketing specialist. Kim, let's kick off with how the 2019 harvest is progressing.
Well, it's going really well down in southwestern Oklahoma. It's moved up to central Oklahoma, Kingfisher, those areas to a limited degree. The reports are that yields are above average as expected, test weight mostly above 60 pounds, anywhere from 50 to 62, 63. Haven't seen any reports on the protein. You look at the price, it's holding well around $4.40 to $4.50 around most of the state. The basis has dropped off a nickel in some locations and increased about a nickel in some locations. So you look what's going on, I think it's coming in as expected.
Let's talk about the WASDE now. Any surprises there or anything unexpected?
Well, I think we had a little bit of everything in the WASDE reports. You look at U.S. wheat, probably as expected, not much price impact. If there was any surprises in it, is that the USDA raised the average annual price from $4.70 to $5.10, a 40-cent increase. You can back that off to Oklahoma. That would predict our average price to be about $4.90. Now remember, that'd be compared to $4.50, and so it's significantly better. You look at corn, potential surprises there. The big question was, will they adjust yields and acres? They did lower the yields and acres, significantly lower production, significantly lower ending stocks. You had a 15-cent price increase in the corn. And if you look at the WASDE, you had a 50-cent price increase on the average annual price. That's good. Beans, cotton left to 64 cents. Beans, a slight increase in it, really no change. And grain sorghum, it'll follow corn.
We've talked about the Black Sea off and on. Give us the latest.
Well, if you look what's going on there, Russia, Ukraine, significantly higher production this year than last year. Last year was about 2.65 billion for Russia. It's 2.8 plus now. Ukraine's looking at a record billion bushel plus crop. You look at world production, they raised it around 700 million bushels. 410 million bushels come from the Black Sea area. So it is dry in some areas in Russia, so there's some potential for lower production, but I think we better plan on more than we had last year.
Lots to think about. Should producers sell their wheat?
Well, if you look back over the last 11 years, 9 of those 11 years you needed to have the wheat sold by August 30. 10 of the 11 you needed them sold by the end of September. So if you want to bet the odds, go ahead and move some wheat. I'd say, I used to say a third at harvest, a third September, October, the final third November, December. You look over the past 11 years, I'd say sell at least a third of it at harvest. And then maybe, look strong at your July and August and pull some trigger in there too. But you got to watch that Black Sea. That's a joker in the deck. If they lose that crop, if it stays hot and it stays dry and Russian production goes down, our price will go up, and that will be after September 1.
Okay, well, keep us posted and we'll see you next week. Thanks a lot, Kim.
Those cow-calf producers with fall calving herds will very soon, if they haven't already started, weaning those calves here in mid to late June. Weaning calves in very, very warm summer temperatures can often be pretty stressful. So doing what we can to reduce the stress during that weaning process is advantageous for both the calf and eventually for our pocketbook. Consider, if you will, the concept of fence line weaning to reduce the stress of those calves that you wean here in June and maybe into July. Fence line weaning means that we actually just move the cows away from the calves across the fence and leave the calves and the cows just with that single fence between them, rather than totally separating the calves to where they're totally out of sight, out of mind, out of earshot from their mothers. That concept has proved to be very successful in reducing stress. For instance, there's data that comes from California several years ago where they compared fence line weaning to that situation where they totally removed the calves away from the cows by a considerable distance. What they found was that the calves that were weaned with fence line weaning, that after just 2 weeks' time, they had gained 23 more pounds than their counterparts that were totally separated away from their mothers. And that difference in gain persisted because when they checked them again after 10 weeks, there was now a 26-pound difference in the gain from weaning until that particular period of time. In that particular data set, they did not see a difference in sickness in the calves between the two groups. But I would remind producers that other data sets involving weaning and stressful weaning has shown that the sooner calves get started eating, then we have less health problems than if those calves are very undernourished for several days going through that weaning process. Now, there's a couple of things to keep in mind if you're going to consider fence line weaning. First of all, you have to have a good fence to keep the cows and calves separated. And there's some good ideas as to different kinds of fences that would do the job for fence line weaning if you just go to the SUNUP website. We've got a link there to an e-extension fact sheet on fence line weaning. It's got several suggestions for fences that should work. The other thing to keep in mind is water. You need fresh water for both sides of the fence, the side with the cows, and of course having a source of water that those calves can reach, fresh water that is very, very attainable for those calves, because in this hot summer weather, we're going to need water available on both sides. Keep that in mind and do your planning before you start that fence line weaning. Consider fence line weaning this year. I think you'll get those calves off to a better start and have a healthier, larger calf at weaning time this year due to that management practice. Hey, we look forward to visiting with you again next week on SUNUP's Cow-Calf Corner.
Well, the recent floods have been devastating for a lot of Oklahomans, but it's also had an impact on wildlife. So Dwayne, how does flooding impact wildlife?
So it can be positive or negative depending on the animal we're talking about. Some things like frogs have had a good year because wetlands have stayed full, lots of habitat for them to breed. Other animals like ground nesting birds have really had a tough year. A lot of nests have been lost. So you can expect things like wild turkey to really decline for next year. People have probably noticed all the dead turtles on the road. They're moving a lot, trying to take advantage of new wetlands that have been filled this spring. So just slow down and avoid them. And if you see one on a road that's not too busy, you might move it across the road, but mostly just watch out for them and try not to hit them. Lots of people are, calling in with snakes in their yard or around their house, and a lot of wildlife's been displaced. So just try to be as tolerant as you can, and remember those snakes are helping control rodents, and they're important, and just let them be.
I guess a little bit more on that. Is it possible for areas like in southeastern Oklahoma where snakes like venomous snakes like cottonmouths might be moving in areas that they wouldn't normally be?
You might see snakes like cottonmouth a little further from water than you're typically used to, but cottonmouths only occur in extreme eastern Oklahoma, and so most of the snakes that are reported are not venomous. They're just non-venomous water snakes.
You mentioned that this, with the flooding, they're finding animals that have been displaced that they wouldn't normally else see. But this is also the time of year that's not, not specific to flooding, where people are finding young animals that they probably should just leave alone.
Yeah, so lots of calls are coming in now about people finding deer fawns. So if you find an animal, a young animal, just leave it alone. Most likely the parent is nearby trying to feed that animal, and the longer you disturb it, the worse off it is for that young animal. And so if you have strong concern that that animal has been orphaned, just call the wildlife department, but let the animal stay where it is. Don't pick it up.
All right, thanks, Dwayne. If you would like some more information on wildlife and flooding, go to our website, sunup.okstate.edu.
That'll do it for us this week. Remember, you can find us anytime online at sunup.okstate.edu, and also follow us on YouTube and social media. I'm Lyndall Stout. Have a great week, everyone, and remember, Oklahoma agriculture starts at sunup.